Infowars.com, we have an article, Obama orders more troops, gunships, and drones to Iraq. It says this announcement will bring to nearly 800 total number of U.S. forces going back to Iraq. Now remember, at first he wasn't going to send anybody. Then it was going to be 300. Then it became 500. Now we've confirmed it's 800. Paul Joseph Watson, who I was just talking to in the UK, has been sent communications from many people in the military saying that their training and their entire units are going in February of next year. So this is a re-escalation of the war in Iraq. We're going to have joining us in the third hour, Peter Van Buren. He was a U.S. diplomat for 23 years. He spent time in Iraq as part of the effort to, quote-unquote, reconstitute Iraq or to reconstruct it. As somebody from the South who knows that history, when I hear the words reconstruction, I grab for my gun because I know what they did there. But they're going to reconstruct an area that they've already destroyed. We're going to talk to him about what he saw in Iraq. We're going to talk to him about the embassy there in Iraq, this massive presence there, as well as the revelations that came out from the New York Times on Sunday about the attitude of Blackwater, threatening State Department investigators, saying, if you bother me, I will kill you, and there's nothing anyone could or would do about it because this is Iraq. That's what Blackwater was telling State Department investigators. So we're going to talk to Peter Van Buren about that. We're also going to talk to him about his book, Ghost of Tom Joad, the story of the 99%. And, of course, today in the news on BBC, we have an internet billionaire, Nick Hanauer, who warns of a coming revolution. He's made a lot of money off of the internet, and he has a warning for his fellow gazillionaires. He says, if we don't do something to fix the glaring inequities in this economy, the pitchforks are going to be coming for us. He says, do you think the U.S. is special? Is it different? You're wrong. No nation is immune. Just ask the Russian czars or the French aristocracy. And so we're going to be talking to Peter Van Buren about the ghost of Tom Joad. He takes the story. Of course, Tom Joad is the character, if you remember, from The Grapes of Wrath. It was the central character, the character played by Henry Fonda in the movie. He kind of updates that from the Great Depression to the 1950s and on. So instead of the Dust Bowl, we've got the Rust Belt. And he updates that idea. Now, this billionaire here, the Nick Hanauer, who was speaking in the BBC, he thinks this can all be saved by creating a new minimum wage. I don't think that you can mandate wealth out of the central government. I think that what we ought to mandate is freedom and dignity. Maybe we ought to mandate the Bill of Rights. If we do that sort of thing, that's what's going to turn it around. It's people having control of their life. If they have control and freedom in their life, if everything is not owned by just a handful of people, if we stop this consolidation somehow, and I think the way to do it is to not allow the government to become the instrument of these corporations. They always use the government to shut down competition. So I think the key thing is to establish individual rights. Certainly isn't going to help, I don't think, to raise minimum wages because that just gets eaten up by inflation. Now, of course, there's breaking news on the immigration front as well. We see that a sheriff has said that we come across decomposed bodies of immigrants quite often, as reported by CBS News. Isn't it interesting that there's been so much said about the 3 teenagers in Israel who were killed, and yet people are not talking about the admissions of this sheriff and others who are saying after they found this 11-year-old Guatemalan boy, the sheriff says, down here, finding a decomposed body, well, we come across them quite often, and that's the Sheriff Eddie Guerra. See, the person who is creating these types of circumstances, of course, is Barack Obama. As the Border Patrol agents who have talked to us have said, nothing has changed in those countries recently. What has changed is the way the immigrants are being handled and the messages that's being sent to them. Yesterday, we had a landmark Supreme Court decision. We had a test of government mandates to buy things versus our First Amendment rights about the free exercise of religion. And surprisingly, the Supreme Court came down on the side of the Constitution, but just narrowly, a 5-4 decision. And some of the justices on the dissenting side were very angry about that. Ginsburg wrote, anyone can assert their religious objections. This is just too radical. Yeah, freedom is a radical idea. So is individual liberty, and it's not just about holding beliefs. It's about the free exercise of beliefs. Kagan wrote, Congress gave this as an entitlement. This is a law. Well, the First Amendment says you shall make no law abridging freedom of speech or the free exercise of religion. Now we have some quotes from Hillary Clinton. She said that she thought that this was very disturbing, deeply disturbing. She got very animated when she was asked about this. They say that she delivered a fiery and impassioned reply, calling it deeply disturbing, among other things. I want to focus on what Nancy Pelosi said, though. She had, I think, the most interesting take on this. She said that this is a gross violation of workers' religious rights. Ooh, their religious rights. Let's think about that for a moment. Is this really about the exercise of religion? We had a lot of people come back and say that that was shameless. They said, are you on some kind of medication, religious rights violation? You'll see a lot of these collected on twitchy.com where they're laughing about what she says. She also tweeted out that the SCOTUS, that's the Supreme Court, took an outrageous step against women's rights, setting a dangerous precedent that permits corporations to choose which laws to obey. To which somebody said, oh, you mean like your president and how he only obeys the laws that suit him? So they're pointing out that hypocrisy. They're pointing out that this isn't about religious rights of women, but it really is. It really is. Because, see, from Nancy Pelosi's standpoint, from the feminist standpoint, it really is a religion. You have to understand that abortion to them is like a sacrament. Listen to what the National Abortion Rights Action League said about this decision.
I am saddened and disappointed and actually quite disturbed. 99% of women use birth control at some point in our lifetime, and the justices showed that they're out of touch.
Okay, you heard her say that 99% of women use contraceptives. We also know that 85% of companies provided that kind of coverage before the Obama mandates. Now, boardrooms are not reaching into the bedrooms of people to stop them from doing anything that they want. The coercion is the other way around. Ron Paul had this to say. This is up on the article that we have on Infowars.com. He said, I think the most profoundly confusing argument has been the argument that not being able to get free birth control is discriminating against women. This to me is utterly amazing. If somebody wants something and they wish to have something, they demand something, they say they have a right to it. That's absolutely wrong. That's why we have this runaway welfare state. That's what Ron Paul said about it. He's exactly right. They're not denying them the right to take this. What they're saying is that they have religious convictions and they cannot be compelled to violate those. And quite frankly, I think if they hadn't I believe that Chief Justice Roberts was blackmailed. We now know, everybody knows that the government is watching everything that everybody is doing. Everyone believes that now. We've been telling you that at Infowars.com for a very long time, but now it's common knowledge. Who do you think they're going to be watching most closely? Well, it's going to be the chief justices of the Supreme Court or the Supreme Court justices, people in power, congressmen. I think that's what's behind this 9-0 decision this last week that said that they have to have a search warrant in order to search people's phones. I think the Supreme Court has been a victim of this kind of blackmail. How else could Chief Justice Roberts write both the dissenting and the majority opinion on this, do a very quick 180 saying that this is not an unconstitutional mandate, it's simply a tax? No, it is an unconstitutional mandate. I'm very glad that Hobby Lobby and this other small company stood up for their rights, put their lives and their property on the line. That's what the founders of this country did to get their rights. We need more people like them who will take this to the mat. We're going to be joined in the next hour by Peter Van Buren. He has a book, The Ghosts of Tom Joad, a story of the 99%. It's essentially a reimagining of the Grapes of Wrath, where instead of the Great Depression, the setting is mid-20th century America. Instead of the Dust Bowl, it's the Rust Belt. And instead of the rapid collapse of the Great Depression, it's going to be about the continual decline of America that we see as we fall into this control by the very few. Now, we're also going to talk to him about the re-escalation of Iraq, because the other thing about Peter Van Buren was for 23 years he worked for the State Department. As part of that job, he was in Iraq. He also wrote another book, We Meant Well, How We Lost the Hearts and Minds of the People in Iraq. So we're going to talk to him as we see Iraq collapsing back into revolution, as we see Obama saying that first he's not going to send any troops in, then it's going to be 300 troops, 500 troops, and now on InfoWars today we have an article saying that it's going to be 800 troops, although we learned a few days ago from an article by Paul Joseph Watson that many people in the military have been told that they are training for redeployment to Iraq, that their entire organization is going to be sent over there. So it's going to be much more than 800 troops. This is doubling every couple of days. So we're going to talk to him about Iraq. We're going to talk to him about the ghost of Tom Joad. And, of course, that's a central character in The Grapes of Wrath. I think it was number 12 on the AFI list of top 100 heroes.
From the water table to our soils to the atmosphere itself, our world is becoming more and more toxic each and every day. But it's not just the air outside that's toxic. Indoor air has been shown to have 2 to 5 times higher concentrations of pollutants than even outdoor air. And most Americans spend 90% of their time inside using toxic chemicals within their homes. There are more than 42 million smokers in the United States. Well over 1,000 types of mold and mildew linked to numerous conditions. And don't forget the fact that 6 million Americans live with pets they're allergic to as well. When I began to research these statistics, it was clear to me it was time to start cleansing my lungs in order to combat the toxic environment that we cannot escape but that we can fight back against. Made with organic and wild cultivated herbs and manufactured in the USA, the new InfoWars Life Lung Cleanse is here in a convenient spray bottle that can be brought with you throughout any toxic environment. Now available exclusively at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.